This is Jeff Fila. I am one of the co-hosts of this meeting. I work for the Grants Gateway, and I'll be doing a presentation here and walking through how to submit or create and submit a claim in the Grants Gateway for your contracts. We do have some members from Department of Labor here as well, and I believe they may want to start with a few comments, so I'll turn it over to them, and then we'll get started.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Palladino. I'm the Director for the Contracts Unit here at the Department of Labor in the Division of Employment and Workforce Solutions. We're really thrilled that you're here today to be able to learn how to use the claim submission format in Grants Gateway so that we can efficiently and effectively make sure that you get reimbursed for all of the funds and the costs that you've encountered while you're rolling out many of your contracts. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand the floor back over to Jeff and Zora. But I did want you to know that this is going to be recorded, so if you need to go back to it, we're going to be sending the recording out, so you'll have that available. We also have a manual that we can send you as well, so you'll have a lot of resources that can help you and your fiscal team navigate the payment process in Grants Gateway as well. So thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And Jeff and Zora, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. So first of all, I'm sharing a PowerPoint. We're going to go through this presentation. And one thing to keep in mind, some of the things here are going to be pretty generic. That is because there's going to be some details that you'll need to get from your contract manager at DOL. Really, that's regarding the specific attachments you'll be making. So understand that part of what I'm doing here does not include detailing how you should fill out those attachments. It's really the details of how to do it in the gateway, not the specifics of your program or your specific contract. So we'll go through these slides, and then I'll go in and log into our test system and actually submit a few claims. So you should be prepared ahead of time for your claim submission. And preparation includes the following here. Be familiar with the requirements and details of your contract. One of the things to think about is there an advance in your contract? Certain types of entities, such as not-for-profits, do have advances, while municipalities don't. So, and also certain contracts may have advances on them, and some may not. So, know the requirements and details of your contracts. Know what your program manager or contract manager expects from you in your claim submissions. Again, that's those attachments I was just talking about. There's certain supporting documentation you need to provide, and you need to know how they want it filled out. And really what needs to be provided. And you should have those documents ready prior to logging in. You know, get everything combined in a folder that you can easily access, or, you know where everything is. It'll make it a lot easier just to be prepared ahead of time. Be aware of what categories your claims will fall under. So your budget is not just one big budget. It's a budget for different sections in what's called an expenditure budget. So there might be travel or contractual agreements or salary. You need to know what section or what category those costs will go under, because that's how you'll log them into the Grants Gateway payment system. If you have multiple items to claim, make sure you know how much of your claim should add up to. So there's going to be several lines probably. And a good way of double checking would be to kind of do the math ahead of time. Okay, I've got 10,000 here and 5,000 here and 2,000 there. That adds up to 17,000. Make sure that when you submit your claim, it also adds up to 17,000. So make sure that you know the total that you're going to be submitting, especially if it spans over several categories or several lines in the different categories. And very important, ensure that you have the right role to submit your claim. This is one of the number one, if not the number one question we get at the help desk, where people try to do something in the gateway and it's not letting them, or it's not letting them submit the final portion of it. And that's always because you don't have the right role. You're not logged in as the right role. So the Grants Gateway is a role-based system, and I have a slide talking about that, so we'll get into that in a minute. So I talked already about the details of your contract. Is there an advance allowed? So if you were to look at your contract, there is the state terms and conditions, which is generic state terms and conditions. That's addressed in section 3B of that section. That won't be specific to your contract though. Specific to your contract is section 1A of attachment D. And when I get into the system, I'll quickly show where to find that to talk about the advance. So you would go to section 1A of attachment D in your contract. Also details of your contract will say how often claims are allowed or required. So some of them may be quarterly, some of them may be monthly. So just be aware of what's expected of you. Should you be claiming on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis? Just going to check these off as I go through them. So there also may be additional payment provisions detailed in Section 3 of Attachment D. I'm not aware of any in these Department of Labor contracts, but I can show you where that might be, just in case there's other instructions you need to be aware of or other items you need to be aware of. And then I'm not aware of any match requirements as well, but if there were match requirements, the the claim submission process would require you to fill in match information as well. So just letting you know kind of generically some of the things that are in the payment process. So back to the program expectations. You should know what your program manager, or in DOL's terminology here, the contract manager, expects from you in your claim submissions. Each agency and program may have different requirements for claim submission. When I talk about agency, I mean Department of Labor, so you're dealing only with Department of Labor right now. But if you have contracts with other agencies, of course, they may have different forms or different processes they want you to follow. Some programs may want multiple items scanned together. Some may want separate attachments. Again, this is details you're going to get from your contract manager at DOL. What is the format of what they want you to provide? There may be some overview sheets or specific formats they require you to use. For instance, the training information form is a form you might be familiar with at DOL. That's a form that's specific to your programs and the agency you're working with. Other agencies may not have that, but of course, that's something you should be familiar with and you'll need to use in your submissions here. And ensure that you have the invoice and proof of payment and that those items line up with your contract requirements. So if you have, an expense you have to put in there, you have to have an invoice, you have to have proof that you've actually paid for it. Again, those are more generic guidelines. Your contract manager at DOL will give you specific guidelines. So some of the supporting documentation that Department of Labor asks for, again, this is not going to be in all contracts, but some of the contracts have these requirements. So for advances, we might ask you for the CPA statement, for a coverage bond, or for a board of directors statement. So that's specifically towards advances. And then for claims, there's supporting documents as described by your contract manager that you'll need to include. And some of them would be that TIF, the training information form, and attendance sheets. So again, be aware of the supporting documentation that you're expected to submit. If you submit a claim and it doesn't have this, it's going to get rejected and sent back to you to be redone. So the other thing about supporting documentation is that they have to be in PDFs. So you may need to make sure whatever your original document was, if it was a spreadsheet, an Excel document or a Word document or a scan, they have to be entered in and submitted in the Grants Gateway as a PDF. An important thing to make sure is that the PDFs are not password protected. If they are protected or a secured document, our system actually won't be able to process them and will produce some errors. So we want to make sure that the PDFs you're providing are not password protected. Of course, they need to be readable. Sometimes if you have a scan, it could be hard to read because it was maybe small font or it's a lower quality. So, the documentation has to be readable by the person that's reviewing your claims. So please make sure that they are. And as I just mentioned, scans are allowed, but obviously native PDFs would be preferred because they would just be a cleaner and clearer document to be able to look at. Again, I've said this several times already, follow your program or your contract manager's guidance for how to prepare these documents. And also pay attention to how they want you to label them. You'll see when I go into entering my claims and entering the documents that there's a field allowing me to name it. And they would like you to name it a specific way. You can see here, voucher number 1, TIF, because it's a training information form I'm attaching. Voucher number 1, attendance sheets. So your reviewer can have an easier time of figuring out what's what and what to expect in that claim. So I talked earlier about the roles, and again, it's very important to make sure you're in the right role. and only the user in the role of grantee payment signatory can submit a claim for payment. Now, the word submit means actually sending it to DOL for review. That doesn't mean that's the only person that can start one, because as you can see in this next bullet here, other roles can start the claim but can't submit it, and that's the grantee system administrator, the grantee contract signatory, and the grantee. But there's kind of no point, if you're the only one doing it, there's no point in you having, starting it in one of those other roles, because you still have to go in as the grantee payment signatory to submit it. So you should be familiar with the roles in the Grants Gateway. Our manual, starting on page 19, I believe, talks about the roles and which ones can do what things and how to create new accounts. It's important to understand that if you already have a role, let's say you're a grantee system administrator, nobody should be changing your role to the grantee payment signatory. That's not how it works. If you need additional roles, you actually need an additional account. And that's fine, that's normal. That's how it works in the Grants Gateway. Some people may have 2 or 3 accounts that they log in, one to do claims, one to do contracts, one to do applications or something like that. So not a big deal if you have 2 or 3 accounts, but the grantee delegated administrator at your organization, they're the one who administers the accounts, and they can set you up with a new one. You may be that person. So realize, again, if you need to log in as the grantee payment signatory, that may mean that someone has to create a new account for you. So after your claim is submitted, there's a couple things you'll be able to do to follow along. You want to make sure that it has been submitted. And in that case, you'll see that the status has changed, and I'll show you when I do one. That'll change to the status of payment in review. And where you would have had a task for that payment, that task would now be gone, of course, because you have submitted it. And there's a couple ways you can follow the progress of your claim. You can observe the current payment status if you were to do a search for your claim. And there's a report called the Payment Schedule Report that I can show you that will tell you kind of where it is in that progress. So I am in the Grants Gateway, and just so you're aware, I'm in our test system, but you will be going to grantsgateway.ny.gov. The one thing I always point out is there's no www in the address here. In fact, today I just saw a question in our help desk where someone who said that they got an error that said our site is insecure. Well, that's because if you go to the site and you were to type in www here, you get that error. The state just doesn't set up our secure websites with the www in the name. So you have to just go to grantsgateway.ny.gov. And you can click on the login button here to log into the system. I'm not going to because I'm doing that in our test system, which is right here. So I've clicked on login, and you can see that I've got a username and password, and I've logged in, and it says welcome John, and affirms that I'm in that role that we talked about, the grantee payment signatory. So you should know how to find your contract in the system. You can't start a claim until you find your contract and you're actually in the contract. So the way to do that is up here in the word contracts in the menu here, kind of the whitish grayish line here. You'll click on contracts and you'll enter in search terms to try to find your contract. So the easiest way is if you know your contract number. And I know mine happens to be 01858. So I can just do that and then click the search button, and the results will show on the bottom. And I can see there's that contract 01858, and it's this grant for $90,000. My organization is called Sample Organization. You can see it's with DOL. So that's how you find contracts. Understand that if you have more information in the search, you may actually have a harder time finding what you're looking for. I've seen people who try to type in the dates here or other criteria, and then it won't find it just because you're not exactly right. So less is more in this case, and really the best way of searching is for the contract number. Now notice, remember I located only one contract because of course I typed in the specific contract number. But I know this is under a grant opportunity called grant, just kind of something generic we put in our test system here. So if I was to search for instead all contracts within the grant opportunity ID grant and hit search, Notice I find two now because there was that 1858 and there's also 1859. So realize that what you're looking at, and if you do have multiple results, make sure you're clicking on the right one so that you can put in claims for the right one, of course. So another thing, if you're stuck and you're just not getting any results, click the clear button and then start your search over again. So I'm going to go back and just search by 1858 or 01858. You don't need that leading zero. And then one more thing, if you have very few or only one contract with in the Grants Gateway, just clicking clear and search will work as well, because if there's only one contract, it'll find them all. If you had 10 or 20 of them, that would obviously be harder to find them. So I'm going to click on the application number because that's the only clickable item here, but that will get me into the contract. Okay, so I'm in the contract. I'm on the contract main page. If you've worked on the contract before, you should be familiar with the format of it and how it works. Everything you'll find is in the forms menu, but that's not what we're doing here. When we work on a claim, we're actually going to start it by going here to progress reports and related documents and initiate a payment. But I'm not going to do that just yet because I want to point out some of those items I talked about in the contract itself, the PDF of the contract. So I clicked on the forms menu, and it's going to bring me to all the different forms that I had to fill out or items that make up my contract. And at the bottom here is contract versions. And I want to look at contract versions just to show you the PDF of your contract, where you can find some of the items that I referenced before in that PowerPoint. I'm going to click on contract versions. And if you're familiar with this, if you're the one that signed it, you might know that it goes through these different processes, the different users to get signed. So this is, again, our test system. We didn't go through Attorney General. We didn't go through OSC. Yours would have. Any one of these will be the same exact contract, just a different level of signature. So this version had no signatures on it. This version had your signature on it or my signature on it. This version had the agency signature on it, and so on. So I'm going to click on this last PDF here just to show you the contract. It's going to download it, and I'll open it up, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So this one is not very detailed simply because it's in our test system. But to read a contract, you should be familiar with it. I'm not going to go through those details. What I am going to do is jump past. So we have 35 pages of the state terms and conditions. So let's go to page 39, let's say, to begin with. And I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. Oh, I said 35, there's 25 pages. Okay, so here's my budget. Remember before I said you need to know what category your items should fall under? So in this case, I have $20,000 in salary, $5,000 in fringe, $12,000 in contractual, $22,000 in equipment, and $31,000 in operating expenses. So I can't go in and put in a claim for travel because I'm allowed $0, so obviously that wouldn't work. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. The details of your budget are in those following pages here. So these are the things that are expected. So I have, for instance, the public health sanitarian, and I have $20,000 for that person. Now, you probably wouldn't be claiming all $20,000 in your first claim because it's split by quarters or by months. So that would be for the whole year. So the details of my other contract line items are following here. And I'm going to skip through them. And after that is the work plan, which we're going to skip through. And after that is that attachment D that I referenced in the PowerPoint earlier. So if you remember, attachment D, section 1A talks about the advance. Well, that's where I am right here. In this case, there's a 25% advance. So the first thing I'm going to do is claim for an advance, and you'll see how that works. There's also, right here, we talk about the claiming frequency. So I said before, you need to know how often claims are due. So your contract manager will obviously tell you as well. In this case, it's quarterly. So if I tried to do it, several times a month or every month, that's not really what was expected of me. What was expected of me is to put it in quarterly. And when it says number of days claims, what that means is we expect you to put in your claim within 30 days after the end of the quarter. Okay, so that's the details I wanted to point out. There's one other thing, and that's going to be usually the very last page of your contract, and that is the special payment and reporting provisions. If your contract had any, it would be here. You can see mine doesn't. This is the last page of the PDF. We can ignore that, but do make sure that you don't have any, or do look at yours and make sure that if you do have any, that you're adhering to them. Okay, so I just wanted to point out how the contract works there and where to find some of the details we talked about. And I am going to now go back into the system and I'm going to start that claim. All right, so I'm back in the gateway and I'm going to go to my contract, which I'm already in. I'm going to go back to the main page just to kind of reorient ourselves. So I've logged in, I've searched for the contract, I've found it, I've clicked on it, and now instead of going to the Forms menu, we will go here to Progress Reports and Related Documents, and we will initiate a payment. So when I do that, it gives you this processing, please wait. Now, sometimes people have problems with this, and perhaps I'm having the same problem right now. We'll find out in a couple of seconds, where it doesn't come off of this page. And all you have to do is kind of wait it out, and then if you come back, you'll have it. Now, I didn't have to wait it out. It actually processed, so that's fine. And I'm now in a claim. I'm in a payment main page for invoice number 001. So you can see what happened was, it took my contract number, which was C01858GG, and it added, can't really highlight, there we go. It added INV on the beginning of it for invoice, and then 001. So in theory, you could obviously have 999 invoices for this contract. So right now, so if you ever are referencing it or referring to it to your program manager, you might want to say something like, oh, I'm talking about claim number 002 or 001. In this case, obviously, this is the first one we started. We're doing 001. So I've started it. I'm on the payment main page. And just like our contract itself, we have a forms menu. And this forms menu is for only the payment, the claim. So you want to, everything you're going to do is going to be in this forms menu here. So I've started my claim, 001, and I'm going to go to the forms menu. I'm just going to click on it. And you can see I've got a few options. And I'm going to go here to payment properties. Payment properties is you telling the system what kind of a payment, what kind of a claim am I putting in here? Am I doing a claim or an advance? And in this case, let's do an advance. And for the period, I forgot what it was. What was it? 2/2/2017. Let's see if I get it right. Zora, if you can type to me if you remember what it was. So I'll just type in oops, 430, of course. So I'm going to put in the date that it ranges, and I'm going to, actually, I'll do this then. Okay, so I'll put that in. So know the dates that you need to be putting in here. I've selected advance, and I'm going to hit save. Now notice there's this payment IRS code. You can ignore that. There's a drop down here, but it's you can see it's not a required field. There's no red asterisk there. And oh, I forgot to pick final payment, yes or no. So no, it's not the final claim. So I'm going to select no. Even if you click yes, it wouldn't prevent you from entering anything, but do select the right item. So I said no, it's not a final payment. So I'm saying to the system, this is in advance. It's covering the period of 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020. And no, it is not my final claim, my final payment. So that was in the forms menu under payment and properties. Now, if we go back to forms menu, not hover over it, but actually hover over it and click on it, you can see that we now have a more detailed or a forms menu with more items. And you can see there's a red hand here under advanced request. Red stop sign should let you know that this is a page that has an error and you need to address. Obviously the error is we haven't done anything on it yet. So let's go there to advanced request. And it gives you the error just because this page is empty, but it's saying, please complete the advanced request justification field, and the amount requested is a required field. So the system, what it does is it actually calculates your request, or calculates your advance based on what's in your contract. So if you remember, my contract, I highlighted that I'm allowed a 25% advance. Well, 25% of $90,000 is $22,500. So I would type in here 22,500 or whatever you wanted to put in here. And then the advance justification is really, you know, per contract details, something like that. Obviously, my contract says that there's an advance allowed. So if I was just to hit save on this page, it's not complete yet. It gives me this error that I have to check the payee certification accept box. So that's down here below. This is me certifying that what I'm claiming for is just, true, and correct. So I'm going to do that. Now, I just want to show you some kind of errors that might occur. If you tried to claim for more than that, so let's say I tried to claim for $23,000 for my advance and hit save, the system is not going to allow that. You can see the amount request cannot be greater than the advance amount calculated. So I put in 23, the system said, nope, I'm only allowed up to 22.5, so that's the issue there. So I'm going to fix that. Yep, since I had certified it, that kind of locked everything. Okay, now I can go back and change it. I'll change it to 22,500. 22,500, and I will check the accept button again, and then we should be okay. Okay, so that worked. I put in my claim and I accepted the payee certification. It shows my name, my title, and the date that I've done it. Now let's go back to the forms menu because there's one other item to look at. So back in the forms menu, there is the payment upload section. So there is supporting documentation you may need to provide. And if you remember from the PowerPoint, there's 3 items I gave as an example for advances: the CPA statement, the coverage bond, and the board of directors statement. So I'm going to go here and I'll do 2 of them. So you can see there's a type, and there's only one type, supporting documentation. There's a category. So since we're just dealing with the advance, the only category that's really applicable here is advance justification. And I'll give it that name, which is CPA statement. So then I have to choose file. Now, depending on what browser you have, it may be worded differently. Choose file is here in Microsoft Edge. If you're in Chrome and Firefox, I think it's the button says browse. Regardless, it does the same thing. It allows me to go to my computer and find what I'm looking for. In this case, it's this thing called sample documentation. Now, of course, you will have something else named properly, and you'll be able to select that. So I'm just going to select the same thing over and over again just because it's a sample document. So I hit save. I don't know if you might have missed that. I hit save up in the top blue bar here, and it saved that page. So now the supporting documentation, the CPA statement, is here. And if I was to click on View File and open it, you can see it's just a sample PDF here called Sample Supporting Documentation. So that's the document I attached, which I called CPA statement. Now I might have something else. I can go here, back to advanced justification, coverage bond, and then do choose file again. I'm going to just pick that same document and then hit save up here in the top right. And now you can see I have 2 items that I've saved. So it's probably a good idea for you to click View File to make sure that the thing I just attached is the thing that I really intended to and I really described. But you can see you could keep adding more if you need to. So we'll go back to the Forms menu. And I'm going to go down to, I'm going to skip Payment Voucher Preview for now. Then we go to Notes. So this may not be required. It may not be something you'll ever use or need to use, but just so you know what it's there for. This is a note system that you can kind of communicate between you and your program manager. Now, it's probably easier to do it in email, but if there was ever something that they wanted to save here kind of forever with the life of this claim, or you wanted to, you can do that. I can type here is a comment and hit save, and you'll see that John Smith did this today at 10:34 a.m. during the status of payment in process. So not required unless your contract manager at DOL says they want you to do that, but I just wanted to point that out to you because there's yet another field in the forms menu here that I wanted to explain them all. Lastly is this voucher preview. So if you want to get an idea of all the things you just did, which would be the payment properties, the advance request, and then the attachments all combined in one. That's this right here. You click on it, and it generates a PDF from all that information that we had just provided. So depending on how much information you've included, it might take a while to do it, maybe a minute or so, but in a minute, it will create this PDF, allow me to download it, which it just did, and I can look at it just to see, okay, what is everything that I'm about to submit look like? Make sure that there's no errors, make sure that, one of the scans isn't backwards or upside down or something like that. So you can see there's that advance number, 001, invoice number 001. It's called an advance, of course. I'm putting in for $22,500. That was the amount that we were allowed. You can see there's an audited payment amount because once it goes to the review process, DOL can actually audit that amount and reduce it if they deem that necessary. So this is the request form that we filled out. We gave some details. Remember, I clicked that accept button. And then next is kind of a table of contents of all the different things that I've included. Remember, I had the 2 items, the CPA statement and the coverage bond. And then finally is those attachments. So here's the first page. This is only 1 page of each. And then here is the second one. So that's everything I expected to do. It's not done yet. I haven't submitted it yet, but I just previewed it and made sure that that is what I intended to submit. So that's right, that is what I intend to submit. And to do that, you would go up here to status changes, and you can see I can apply the status of submitted or canceled. Of course, I don't want to cancel it. I want to apply the status of submitted. And then it gives you this affirmation page just to agree that what you're submitting is just, true, and correct. And I click I agree. And it is now submitted. Now, how do I know that? One thing I should have shown you before was the status that it was in at first. If I click on details here, it was in the status of payment in process. Well, you can see now it's in the status of payment in review. So I'll point that out when I start the next one, which is the actual claim, but you can see that status. Now, if I was to go in back to the contract, remember we're here in invoice number 001. If I go back into the contract, I can click right here to get into it, or I could go up to contracts and search for it, but I'm going to click here. I can hover over progress reports and related documents and note that there is now an additional item here, that 001 that we were just working on. So I'm going to initiate yet another because I'm going to do an actual claim here instead of an advance. So just to remind you, I went to contracts, I searched for contract number 1858. I'm in the contract. By clicking on the application number here, I'm now in it. I want to get to a claim or a payment. And if I hover over progress reports and related documents, I can initiate yet another payment. So I'll click on that. And there's that processing, please wait again. In a matter of seconds, it'll create my second one, which of course will be invoice 002. I started claim number 002. I'm in claim 002. I'm going to go to, just like we did before, into the forms menu, into payment properties, because I'm telling the system what type of claim am I entering. So in this case, it's not an advance like we did before, it's a claim, and no, it is not my final claim. And again, I forgot to check the dates. I'm gonna guess it's 1/1/2020 to 3/31/2020. And again, you can ignore that IRS payment code. All right, so it's claim. No, it's not the final, and this is the dates that it's covering, and I'll hit save. So by me selecting claim and not advance, it gives the system a couple other options, or the system, I should say, the system gives you a few other options now. So if I go back in the forms menu, remember you have to click on it, not just hover it. There's now some different pages here that we saw with the advance. The most important one is this, the unitemized expenditure claim detail form. So we're going to go through here, and this is where we're going to tell the system the dollar amount of what we're claiming. So if you remember from my contract, I had $20,000 in salary, $5,000 in fringe, $12,000 in contractual, and so on. So I obviously can't put in here for $25,000. And you probably wouldn't put in for $20,000 because, of course, this is going quarterly. So let's just kind of divide it by 4, and we'll say this is $5,000 that I'm putting in here. All right, fringe, let's say it's 1,200. Travel, nothing. Contractual, let's say it's 3,000. Equipment, let's say it's 5,500. And for operating expenses, let's say it's 6,000. All right, so I'll hit save here. You can see if, as I scroll down here, there's a couple other things. There's match. I mentioned that in the presentation. If match was a requirement on your contract, you'd be required to fill out the amount of match you had towards each category as well. And the other thing is we do have that accept button here, the payee certification. I'm not going to hit it just yet. I'm going to hit save. I'm not going to hit it because I'm going to show you what happens when I try to submit it later and I haven't remembered to click that button. Okay, so it gives me that error. I'm going to ignore it as if I didn't see it. But I did say that I'm putting in for 5,000, 1,200, 3,000, 5,500, 6,000 for a total of $20,700. So all the supporting documentation I provide should be for these specific categories and should add up to $20,700. Because if I don't, it's going to be rejected or sent back to me by my contract manager. All right, so let's go back into the forms menu, ignore the error on this page, and we're going to go into that payment uploads page, and we're going to provide the uploads that are required. So remember I had a TIF, a training information form. So I'm going to go here, and I don't even know what category that's under. If someone can tell me. Is it salary? Anyway, I'll say voucher 1 TIF, and I'm going to find that document by clicking on choose file and then picking that sample document. Obviously, you'll be picking your TIF that you saved in PDF format, and I'll hit save. Okay, and then we have attendance sheets was another type of item I could select here. Again, I don't know what category to put them in, so someone type to me if you can what I should be putting in.
It depends on which contract people have and what cost category their trainees are under. So because we have multiple contractors here for different programs, so it would be, they would look at their contract and wherever sort of the trainee costs would be associated, that's what they would select for their category.
Gotcha, okay. So in this case, I'm just gonna pick contractual services, but you should fine tune that by looking at your contract and or by talking with your contract manager. So contractual services, and I'm going to just say voucher 1, attendance sheets. And again, I need to pick the document. I'll do choose file, find that, and hit save. All right, and I could go on and on. I forget what the number was, 31,000 or so worth of claims that I'm putting in here. So I may have several documents to include here. I've only done 2. All right, so we'll go back to the forms menu. And we'll do that preview again. Now, you don't have to do the preview. I do like to do it just to make sure that what you included is what you intended. Certainly, you could have clicked on View File for each one of those attachments, but I think it works better if you can see the whole thing as one. You'll also know if you're getting an error. If you get an error, that's because maybe you have one of those protected files that our system doesn't like. And you'll know right ahead that it's going to reject it before you actually try to submit it. So that worked. I clicked on Open File. I'll zoom in here a bit. And there it is, claim number 002, payment number 002. It's a claim, not an advance, for the period covering. So in this case, it was 1/1/3/31, and it was for $20,700. Here are those details on that expenditure claim detail form. So again, the 5,000, the 1,200, and so on. Nothing for match. Remember, I forgot to certify it here. And then the kind of table of contents of the different attachments I have. In this case, I have only the 2, the voucher 1, the TIF, and the attendance sheets, what category I assign them under. Again, you'll have to get those details as you go through. And then, of course, those attachments follow. So here's that first one. And here's the second one. All right, so everything looks good to me. I'm not noticing that I have this error and I try to submit it. I go to status change and payment submitted. and it gives me that error. And it says, wait a minute, you didn't do the payee certification except checkbox on the unitemized expenditure claim detail form. So notice, I don't have to click back here and go through my claim. I can just click right here on the error page, and it'll bring me to the page that has the problem. So it brought me here, and I realized, oh, I have to sign it. Now again, if you weren't a grantee payment signatory, you wouldn't even be able to check that box. You could have done everything I just did as a grantee contract signatory, but you won't be able to check this box unless you're a payment signatory. So I'm going to do that. I'll click accept, click save. I'm going to refresh the page, no more error. And if I scroll down, you can see now I have certified it with my name. It puts in my title that's found from my profile and today's date. Now I should be able to submit it to DOL. I hover on status changes. You don't have to hover, you can click on it as well. Hover on status changes and apply the status of payment submitted. And I agree to the statement. And that's been taken care of. And again, I forgot to show you that status of payment in process. Here we are now in payment in review. So Zora behind the scenes is going to reject my claim for me. Not necessarily reject it, but send it back to me because I didn't provide enough information. I'm going to show you what you would do in that case. So go ahead and do that, Zora, and let me know when you're done. While she's doing that, I'm going to go and show you a couple ways of searching here. So you remember the main way we found this was we went to contracts. So I go to contracts, I search for the contract number, or remember I can search for the ID. It was called grant, and I hit search. I find that contract. In this case, there was two of them. There was 1859 and 1858. You remember we were working in 1858. I'll click on the application number, which brings me into the contract. And if I hover over progress reports and related documents, there's those two. 001 was the advance, 002 was the claim. Now, there's another way of getting into your payments, as you might have noticed up top here, is payments. I can go into payments, and I can, first of all, clear this page because it remembers the last thing you searched for. I'll hit clear. And I'm just going to type in, why don't I type in the contract number, 1858 or 01858, and hit search. And you can see it locates those claims through this search as well. Now it gives me a little more information. It tells me that one is a claim, one is an advance. It shows the dates that they're for and the status they're in right now. Now Zora, behind the scenes, has kicked this one back to me, and I can see now it's in that status of payment information requested. So what that means is the reviewer went through it, and she couldn't certify it because I was missing something, something didn't add up, whatever it was, they've sent it back to me. Now, she may have emailed me separately and told me, but it's going to allow me to get into it. Now, what I want to talk about, though, this is really for the DOL contract managers and for those of you, the grantees here, what you can and can't do in this status. So remember, in our initial status, in payment in process, we obviously could do everything because it was a brand new one. If I go into this claim number 002, that's been kicked back to me in payment information requested. Notice that I cannot go into the expenditure claim detail form and make changes. If I click on it, it does have the save button, but it doesn't allow me to make changes. So I can go here. I wonder, yeah, see, it doesn't have the accept button there. It doesn't let you make changes. So if there were changes to be made, the auditor, the reviewer at DOL could have made that. So maybe I put in for $20,700, but it turns out I should have put in for $19,700. Maybe they adjusted one of these line items. So they can do that. They could have dropped this one down to $3,000 because that's what my documentation supports. And maybe in conversations we've had with the contract manager, that's what they told us that we need to do. But just again, realize the grantee payment signatory cannot make edits to this page. The only thing I can make edits to are the attachments. So maybe what I did was I included, not enough information here or something that was incorrect. So notice this grayed out field display in voucher. My contract manager could unselect this and say, you know what, this voucher one TIF that you provided is not good. Please do it again and submit another one. So I can do that. I'll go here. I'll put it under salary. I'll call it, I could call it the same one if I want. I'll just call it new just to show you. And I'll go find that document. And now I'm saying, okay, this is the document I meant to upload, which includes everything that adds up to the right amount. So you can see that there. So once I submit this back to my contract manager, they can actually uncheck this and say, this one's not going to be displayed in the voucher because this is the correct one, and only these two would be. So I wanted to point that out, that when we're in the status of payment information requested, the only real thing you can do is make changes to the attachments. All right, so I've saved this page, and before I submit it, I'm going to go back to the Forms menu. I'm actually going to go back one more to the menu, which is the main page of the payment, and I wanted to click on this Payment Schedule Report. So we talked about the different statuses. If you wanted to get an idea of where your claim is or what's been going on with it, maybe it's been a few days. If I click on Payment Schedule Report, it creates and allows me to see a PDF. I can click on it, and it's just basically a schedule of items that of the workflow. So payment in process was the first thing that I did. The grantee payment signatory did it. There's no days scheduled for it because that's just, however long it takes is however long it takes. It took 0 days, of course, because I did it in a matter of minutes. But then it shows the different statuses. It went to program manager for payment in review. That program manager sent it back to me in grantee payment in payment information requested, which technically I have 5 days to deal with. And so far it's been 0, so I've got 5 days left. And I can see those statuses as it goes through here. It was in payment in process, started at 10:38. I submitted it at 10:47. It went to review at 10:47, and Zora kicked it back to me at 10:47, which is now where we are, and I've now submitted it again. So I actually haven't submitted it again. So that was, again, this payment schedule report. Just wanted you to understand how the workflow works here. So I am going to submit it again. I can go to status changes. Of course, I could cancel it, but in this case, I'm going to apply that status of payment information submitted. And I guess I need to go back there.
Yeah, every time you submit, you have to certify it.
Okay. Okay, that's the Unitemized expenditure claim detail form. Right, so you do have the save button here, and that's the only reason why, of course. You can't change the details of the dollar amounts, but you have the save button because you have to accept it. So I'll hit save. Now I can do a status change and submit it. And it's now, if I click on details, in that status again of payment in review. So it's no longer something that I can work on. It's in the hands of my program or contract manager, whoever is reviewing this at a level 1 status. So what'll happen now is it'll go through 2 levels of review. The first level can make any edits if they need to and submit it. The second level can do the same thing, but then that second level person is also the one that approves the payment. So approves my claim and then puts it in to allow me to get paid. However you get paid, you'll get paid. It's through electronic funds. The details should already be in the system for your organization. And I don't think you'll get an email or anything when it's been paid. I think it just kind of appears. Anybody who's had experience with that might know how that works.
Exactly. So you can reach out to them actually today if you'd like. If you haven't received the executed email from your contract manager that details all the documents that need to be provided with your voucher. So you could definitely do that if you haven't seen that or unaware of it. But once your contract is executed, contract managers always send out an executed email, again, detailing the information that needs to be supplied in order to allow you to voucher. The biggest mistake we typically see is that the supporting documentation is not provided. So, you definitely want to sort of take that advice that Jeff gave you at the beginning about lining up all your documents, you would definitely want to make sure that that is done. So whether it's done for monthly vouchers or quarterly vouchers, the biggest mistake we see is that people fail to submit the supportive documentation that they need in order for us to be able to process those vouchers. So your contract managers have that information. They will be able to provide that to you about what needs to be provided, whether it is a trainee information form and which one for each trainee, whether it's attendance sheets if you have a training type of contract, whether it's your detailed reimbursement request spreadsheet. So there's a number of pieces of information that your contract manager can direct you toward to make sure that you supply that.
And Joanna, training or attendance sheets, would they be only one, or there could be several of them because they've done several sessions?
Right, so there could be multiple tips. Let's say you have 16 trainees, then you would need 16 trainee information forms if you're seeking reimbursement for those trainees. So you could have one, you could have 100, depending on obviously the number of trainees that you're seeking reimbursement for.
I guess what I'm getting at is, would they combine them into one, or you would have several different uploads for the same?
Yeah, it's easier to do one PDF for all of your trainees, so there aren't as many documents to open and then compare. So if you could do one single attachment for all of your tips, one single attachment for your attendance sheets, one single attachment for any other supportive documentation, that would be best.
Sounds good.
And then, yep, and then the other issue is to make sure that you label that clearly. So we see often that people will upload 18 different attachments and they're not saved or labeled in a way that makes sense for your contract manager or for our voucher fiscal team. So the more organized your supportive documentation, the quicker your reimbursement request goes.
Yeah, and remember, if you're looking at the screen here, when we labeled them, the PDF gives us this table of contents, and this makes it a lot easier for your contract manager to go through and say, all right, I expect the tip first, and then I should see the attendance sheet. So they'll know, you know, the way you labeled them will help them figure out what's what.
Exactly. And the Grants Gateway system, the online payment system, is being used you know, from different state agencies in different ways. It's being rolled out somewhat differently. So let's say you have multiple contracts in 3 or 4 or 5 different state agencies or authorities. Your best bet is to always work with your contract manager at that respective state agency because they may not be using the Grants Gateway online payment process.
Right. Yeah, so that goes into one of the questions that was asked. So someone asked, is this strictly for DOL grants or for all New York State grants? Not all state agencies and not all programs at each state agency uses the payment process here in the gateway. Some of them just do it externally via email and then enter it in manually into SFS. So this particular way we did it is specifically for these DOL contracts. However, it's a pretty generic process, and besides the different types of attachments you do, this is how the other programs at other state agencies do it. If they do it. So that doesn't mean everybody does it, but if they do it, you know, 99% of what we did here is exactly the same. Someone asked how big the PDF could be for a single attachment. That's a good question. So the system does limit, we say 10 megabytes. I've seen larger be accepted. 14 or so seems to be acceptable. That's only for a single attachment. All the attachments combined can be obviously more than that. I think it's closer to 100 or more than 100 megabytes. So most PDFs you have should be able to work fine. Now, if you do have something that's being rejected, that's because one of 2 reasons. Well, I'd say one of 3 reasons. One is that it's a protected PDF and the system doesn't like it. The other would be if sometimes we have issues with the state's file system, and if that system happens to be down at that moment, you get an error. And the third would be if it's too large. If it's too large, you have to figure out a way of reducing it. Maybe you have to split it into 2, and you have to, you know, do first half, second half, or something like that. So just be aware, if you get an error like that, that's probably the cause that it's, if it's too big of a document. And if you look at it in your system on your computer and see how large it is, you know, if it's more than, like I said, maybe 14 megabytes, that would be the reason, I would bet. And then someone asked, can you state what the TIF is? I think we went over that enough a few minutes ago, but the contract manager will review that with you. That's the training information form. It's a standard form that DOL has been using for quite a while now for their contracts related to these training contracts. And Joanna, if you want to jump in on that.
Right, and we have a number of different versions depending on what program you've been awarded. So that's where we're working with your contract manager to make sure that you're using the correct one for whatever program you're operating is helpful. So for instance, if you were awarded through the Consolidated Funding Application Workforce Development Initiative and you have an existing employee training program, and let's say you also have a new hire training program, those are different TIFs.